Hello, welcome back. Thanks for joining me on another worm video update. I'm working with my regular tote at this moment, the one that I started the horizontal migration on just last week. And I gotta say, in doing the horizontal migration in the regular tote bins, the worms really move over pretty quickly. There are not a lot of worms in the finished castings at all. The majority of them have moved over to the new bedding and they're piled right where I put the food. So I will say that doing the migration in these totes is very easy and I've been very successful with it. I'm not quite sure what I was doing wrong the first year I had the worms, but this is the method that I prefer in my regular totes. For those of you that are just joining me on the videos or new to vermicomposting, when I feed the worms, the powder that I shake over the top of them is the grit that I use for my worms. It is a mixture of diatomaceous earth and neem cake, more for keeping down the other pests that can come into the bin, and then crushed eggshell. This helps the worms break down the and digest the food in their gizzard. So that's what that white material is that I sprinkle over the top. I'm not going to remove the finished castings just yet. I'm going to give the worms one more week. It would be great if I could finish harvesting in just a week, but I'm going to give them one more week to move out of the finished castings. And then this regular tote bin is set up for the next week. Moving over to my second regular tote, it wasn't as broken down as I would like for it to be, but then I remembered that a lot of the finished castings that I'm gathering are going to be going outside. And in my raised beds, I don't mind if there's a little bit of material left over, things like seeds and some cardboard, because it's going to break down anyway in the outdoor raised beds. So after sifting through this material, I did feel that this bin was ready for its harvest as well. For this bin, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I've always wanted to experiment with the trash can style bin, and I hadn't had a chance to try it. So this cycle, I am going to try the trash bin style of maintaining the regular tote. Now I started as if I was just going to put all the material to one side, and then I remembered that was what the plan was, to do this as a trash bin. So I moved everything over to the other side of the bin. My version of the trash can style is going to be putting larger chunks of cardboard into the bin instead of using the shredder as I have been. Now this is going to be a little bit more work for me because I won't be able to just put the cardboard into the shredder and get those nice little fine pieces. I actually will have to manually slice up the cardboard instead. But I just want to see if in a regular tote you can maintain it as a trash can style. This is also going to be a test for me because I don't usually leave my bins to be. By using the larger material, it's going to be harder to fluff it up and it would disturb the worms a lot more. So this will be a test of my patience to not dig in there and see what's happening with the worms. So I did thoroughly wet the material, the cardboard that I use for the bedding. And this is some cocoa core. It did get mixed in with a little bit of my seed starting mix, so there is some perlite. That's what the white material is, nothing special. But I am just putting a layer of cardboard, a layer of the cocoa core, another layer of cardboard, and building until I have a good enough area for what I think my worms are going to migrate into. My best guess is that it's going to take them a while to migrate into this material from the nice and fluffy bedding. So we'll see how long the horizontal migration takes me in this particular bin. So this bin is going to be run exactly the same as my other bins, just that I'm not going to use finely chopped food or finely shredded cardboard in it. Once I have completed building my layers for this bin, I sprinkled a little bit more of the grit on top, and then this bin is set up for the week. I am anxious to see how this bin turns out. Who knows if I will be successful with the trash can style. I may have to restart this bin in a month or so, but it doesn't hurt to try, and hopefully if I see any issues with the worms, I will be able to catch it soon and prevent any disasters from happening. Moving over to the third bin, this is the Vermibag tote, which is also headed into the harvest. And using the same thought process, when I looked at the amount of material that was in the bin and the size of the items that were not fully broken down, I felt confident that I could use this in my raised beds as well. Now, I haven't done a migration in the Vermibag totes in some time, so I'm a little hesitant how this is going to turn out because I've always had problems in the past. Typically I did my bait trays, but I'm very sensitive to doing the bait trays now. Since the last time I did that, I lost a whole colony almost. So I'm going to try the horizontal migration in here. And the main thing I'm going to need to focus on in doing the migration is making sure the material stays wet. And I ran out of cocoa core, so I had to use just the shredded cardboard, which in most cases when I put shredded cardboard in, it stays really moistened. So hopefully that'll be the case for this. So I'm going to make a nice bed of shredded cardboard, then put some food into here, and then wet down all the layers of cardboard and cover up the food with another couple of layers of cardboard, and then adding the grit to it as well. This is another test in terms of harvesting as to whether I can do the migration successfully or if I really do have to use the bait tray. I went back and reviewed my material, and I still couldn't figure out what went wrong with that harvest where the bait trays ended up destroying the colony. I'm unsure what happened, so I hope that the migration does work out better for me because I don't want to risk losing a bunch of worms, because it's been about 6 months now and I am still truly trying to rebuild that colony that I lost. So the migration has begun for 2 of the 4 bins, and that's kind of manageable for me. It's not too much work. The bins are not too heavy moving them around. So I think I prefer to do maybe 2 bins at a time. Time will certainly tell how this harvest will turn out, but this bin is now also updated for the next week. Moving over to the 4th and final tote style bin that I have. This is the tote that is receiving all of the castings from the breeder bin experiment. Now this bin is kind of full. The material isn't breaking down quickly, and that probably has to do a lot with there being a lot of smaller worms in here, not many mature worms. But every time I dump in the castings from the breeder bin, I see a lot of small worms in there. So the material from the breeder bin did dry out pretty well. So this week I'm going to add the material from the breeder bin. Well, not exactly from what's in the breeder bin right now. The castings that I harvested about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'm going to add that in. Both sides got a chance to dry out, and it wasn't as wet as it had been in the previous weeks. Before, it was almost a muddy texture. Now it's clumpy but not as muddy. So I'm going to add all of this into the bin, and it occurred to me that I'm probably going to have to do some type of harvest or sifting through the material in a week or 2, because there's a lot of older castings or finished castings that I used when I did my breeder bin. And because of that, there's not much for the worms to go in and break down any further. They're just really going to turn it silty, and I really don't want it to become really fine and muddy. So I'm probably going to have to come in and sift this in about 2 or 3 weeks and do a reset to the bin. Until I do that, I'm just going to let the bin be. As with the previous weeks, I don't tend to do much until I find that the bin is wet. And because I was adding slightly wetter material and I didn't want to have it become too clumpy, I am going to mix in some cardboard into here, give another source of food for the worms to break down, mix it in really well, and then of course add the grit into the bin, and then this bin is set up for the next week. You can see here that the level of material is pretty high in this tote, and I don't think that for the next cycle from the breeder bin I will be adding into this bin. I'll find another one of my bins which could benefit from a new addition of worms and put it in there, but there's a lot of material in here, so it's done for a little bit. On to my last and solo flow through composting system, my Vermibag Mini. Now what I'm pointing out here is the beetles that are on the bubble wrap up at the top. I don't know what type of beetles they are. They're just these small little brown beetles that always seem to appear in my flow through system. I don't tend to see them in the tote style bins, which is really strange because the tote style bins don't have a real cover. They just have the mosquito netting. So I'm not sure why I don't see them in any other bin, but they tend to show up in here, and the weather can affect how large the population is. How much food is left from week to week affects the size of the population. So the population is starting to explode. We've had some warmer weather, so I'm going to make sure I do add additional grit, which has that diatomaceous earth and neem cake in it, to help cut down on the appearance of the beetles. I continue to focus on feeding the bin around the edges with food, and then I also fed in the middle this week, which I haven't done in a couple of weeks because the middle was very dry. The level of material in here is kind of low, so I will be adding more material to this next week, and I'm gonna give it a thorough wet down because there were some drier areas that I was feeling as I was moving the material around. I think I'm gonna wait. The plan at this point is to wait and harvest the material out of the Vermibag Mini after I've completed the 2 migrations that I'm working on. Harvesting the flow through system really does a number on my joints, so I don't want to be lifting heavy bins as well as bending down and trying to unzip this. So it'll be a couple weeks before I do this, but it is on the list to be harvested soon. And I did go ahead and sprinkle that grit on the top just to counteract the explosion of beetles that I'm seeing. And once again, thank you for sticking with me all the way to the end. I do appreciate you watching my content. If you enjoy, please like and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching.